Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Corrections for the week of April 19th. For those of you who do not know, Corrections is a digital exclusive, which is a fancy word that means not good enough for television. This is an ongoing collaborative effort between me and the audience to get things exactly right. I want to start last week. This is sort of I should note most of the corrections are based on things that were said in previous corrections. We talked about the fact that Benjamin Franklin's wife, although we established last week common law wife, it's really quite a story. I got it all off Wikipedia. And while I'm reading about Ben Franklin on Wikipedia, it occurred to me, someone should write a book about that guy. Ben Franklin's wife's name was Deborah, and I thought that was funny because that did not seem like a name that would be around in revolutionary times. And then people pointed out Deborah was in the Bible. And then I said in another corrections, what's next? Candace going to be in the Bible? And then I found out Candace was indeed in the Bible. And then last week I said, because someone pointed out to me, that Candace was a queen of Ethiopia. Then I was told Candace is a title that means queen. Yeah, like Pharaoh, you know. So Pharaoh's not a name, it just means, you know, king. So Candace means queen, which is why probably one of the most popular catchphrases in the Bible is, "Yas, Candace." Did you like that, Amber?
Yeah, I did like that.
Yeah. I said journeyman instead of journeyman. And then I pointed out that a journeyman would be Steve Perry. But then it was pointed out to me that he's no longer in Journey. He's an ex-journeyman. So I should have said Neil Sean. Guys, I've been getting this one wrong for almost a full month now. Prime Minister of Ireland has a title. I first said it was Taoiseach, corrected, said it last week, Taoiseach. I've been told now it is Taoiseach. Now, I'm sure that's not perfect. I also pointed out last week that we were really upset to get that wrong because we have an Irish poet on staff, an old man named Seamus. And I pointed out that he sort of fell asleep at the wheel on that, probably because he was a little drunk. And I said that Seamus often says to us that he wants a wee taste. Someone pointed out wee is not what Irish people say, it's what Scottish people say. So we did some digging, we checked his paper. It turns out Seamus is Scottish. He's an old Scottish poet, and obviously he's been let go. Because when you're looking to hire an Irishman, you don't want to hire a Scotsman. And by the way, we don't need an Irish poet because I realize we have a lot of Irish guests on the show who can teach us how to say these words, like Saoirse Ronan. I was told that in a monologue this week, instead of reverse mortgage, I said revorce mortgage. I found that hard to believe. I did some digging, and you tell me. A reverse mortgage. I mean, I heard reverse. Let's hear it one more time. A reverse mortgage. You know what bothers me is nailed mortgage. And there's just never any focus on that. I said homonyms when what I meant to say were two words were polysemic. I did not mean to say it. I didn't even know that was a thing. Oh, we did, we said that Jeanine Pirro had a television show on Fox News called Jeanine Pinot. And a lot of people pointed out that in the graphic, it was a red wine, and that Pinot is a white wine. And a bunch of people pointed that out, and I would just like to say to them, maybe next time you're at a restaurant, call the sommelier over and ask them about Pinot Noir, you Philistines. Also, I'm just going to come clean that I had to go to Shoemaker's office today and say, what's something you would call people who don't know about wine? And he said Philistine. So I used it, but I didn't have it earlier today. And Philistine, also from the Bible. It was Phyllis. There's a woman in the Bible, an Israelite named Philistine, who just hates. She was very indifferent and hostile to the arts. Philistine, they would say. There's a whole section of it in the Bible. People are like, Phyllis, there's a new exhibit at the museum. She's like, what do I need that for? And they're like, you want some nice wine? And she's like, wine? Who am I, the Candace of Sheba? And they would always go to her husband, Irving Stein, and say, Irving, can you talk to him? Can you talk to Phyllis for us? And he would just go, ugh, because he was over it. So a Philistine is someone who is hostile or indifferent to the arts, and an Irving Stein is someone who is hostile or indifferent to a Philistine. So we mentioned Pogs now 2 weeks ago. And someone said, hey, I'm calling you out, Seth. You were 31 when Pogs came out. You didn't write that joke. And then last week I said, I didn't. You got me. John Mulaney wrote that joke, which means by that math, John was a 22-year-old Pog enthusiast. Then a bunch of people said, hey, man, you got bad data from the first correctioner because Pogs were mid-90s was the height of Pogs. So I was 22, let's say, when Pogs became very popular, too old for it. Mulaney was like 10 or 11 years old, so it is quite possible that he was a Pog enthusiast then. I got confused when I called him a Pog enthusiast last week, because when I met him, when he was like 25, 26, when he got hired at SNL, he was still super into Pogs. Like, you remember he wanted to get paid in Pogs? And we had to say, we'll pay you money and you can use it to buy Pogs. And he was like, oh, I'd love to cut out the middleman. I think it was a tax thing. Do you know what POG stands for? Anybody? Pogs were, it's a Hawaiian thing, and there was a drink called passion fruit orange guava. That's what POG comes from. Don't look at me like I'm making it up, Shoemaker. You know what that's the hardest part about this? Is how little you want new information. You are a Phyllis Stein. What else do we got? Oh, somebody said when we used it again tonight, there's that LMFAO Little John song, Shots, 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 Shots. The name of that song, of course, is Midday Revelry. Somebody said, hey, don't play shots that many times without the everybody. That's not a correction. This is correct. It's not, I'm not taking requests here. Okay? That's a different thing. So if you want to correct me, I'll take it. But we can't mess around with this format. Because nobody thinks this is a good idea. Okay? Nobody, I'm doing it for you. No one in my life thinks it's good I'm doing this. My therapist was like, why do you think you're doing this? And I'm like, I don't know. Why do you think I'm doing it? And she said, it's obvious to me. This is due to the fact that your father was never satisfied with your work, and you're trying to prove to him that you can, in fact, be perfect. And I said, you don't know what you're talking about. And then I called my dad up, and I said, Papa, did you see corrections? And he said, I don't watch online content. And I said, it's a digital exclusive. So we got to take this seriously. Okay? 'Cause why else are we doing it? And I want to end tonight. I don't want just myself to reflect on the week. I want everybody on my crew, and I'm going to leave it to my director, Alex, in the booth. When he feels like everyone who works here, because this isn't just me, this is top down. When he feels like everyone understands the importance of getting everything right, he can cut the feed.